I will now call to order the Monday, April 16th, 2012 informational meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of you here at Carnegie Town Hall and those viewing us on CityLink or at siouxfalls.org. We'll begin today's meeting with a staff report by Lori Hogstead, City Clerk. Lori?
All right. Council Chair Aguilar and City Council members. A couple items first. I would like to congratulate Denise Tucker. Denise, one of our assistant city clerks, has been appointed to the 2012-13 Public Relations and Marketing Committee for the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. So kudos to Denise. All right, and on that note, we also will have a Municipal Clerks Week proclamation on the meeting tonight that I believe Tamara and myself will be there to accept. Election results will be on the meeting tonight. Item number 41, a resolution, and that will show that we had a total of 13,701 ballots cast at our election on Tuesday with a turnout of 14.28%. That's right in line with the last three non-mayoral elections that were held, and those percentages range from 14 to 19%. And on election, we will talk a little bit about our election day issues, which really ties into our ballot stock. And just to give you a little bit of a preview, our ballot stock was ordered in February of this year. A total of 33,500 ballots were ordered. The thing that made it interesting is we had 9 different ballot styles depending on the election, the part of the election that the citizens could vote in. We had at-large only, at-large school, northeast only, northeast school, northwest only, northwest school, school only, southwest only, and southwest school. So 9 ballot types. And the ballot allocation was determined in early March. In other words, which ballots and how many of each would be allocated to which of the 12 vote centers. This was challenging for the team to put together because the citizens could go to any of the 12 vote centers and not knowing exactly which ones they would go to, the ballot allocation was put together. That was used based on taking a look at the wards and precincts and past voter history. Our first indication that we were having ballot issues was around 11 o'clock. We started getting calls from some of the vote centers stating that they were completely out of ballots and they had people in line, or they were down to 5 ballots of a certain type and had people in line. Unfortunately, the ballot stock that was left from the election that had not been allocated to the vote centers was in the car of a school district employee. We tried to reach her many times to no avail. When we did reach her, she was also receiving calls and was trying to run around the city as a one-person team trying to get some of these ballots allocated. So we decided we were officially in election crisis mode. We were still getting calls coming in and still were not able to access the ballots. So our team, the city clerk's office team, began calling the 12 vote centers, asking them for their inventory of what they had in stock for ballots. Once we determined that, we put together a spreadsheet of the inventories of all the different 9 types of ballots. Our only option at that time, since we were unable to reach the person that had the ballots in their vehicle, was to begin pulling ballots out of the vote centers that had an overabundance of a certain ballot type and moving those to where they were needed. So we sent staff out throughout the city, and I did my share as well, and we picked up ballots and took them to where they were needed. I think it was around 2 p.m. that Secretary of State Jason Gant came to our office, thank goodness, along with one of his employees, and they went right to work. We did another inventory because our fear was the after-work rush would cause us huge problems if we ran out of ballot stock of any type. So again, Jason and his employee with the Secretary of State, they started making calls and inventorying all the ballot sites, or the vote center sites as far as ballot stock. We put our team together in the Carnegie, in the extra room in there, and determine where we had to go with ballots so that we would not have that situation happen between the time of, say, 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Fortunately, no more calls were received. We were able to get the ballots to where they were needed throughout the city. Two things really caused us the problems that day. One was the fact that one person had the extra ballot stock in their vehicle, and many times we were unable to reach that person. Asked her several times to come to the Carnegie, and it finally took the Secretary of State to tell her to get here, and it was at 4 o'clock. So this problem started about 11, and we finally corralled her in about 4 o'clock. The other issue was that ES&S, which is the system that works with our e-poll books, had told us, and I have notes to indicate this, that we would be able to watch through the computer system with the e-poll books, that we would be able to watch and see which ballots were running short at which vote centers. When we had a meeting the next day with them, they informed us that was not even an option on their software yet, and I believe they understood that that had to be an option the next time. All right, so many good things, though, happened with this election. Election night at the county went great. We had our final numbers in by 9:30. It took a little bit of time to get the first batch in because, remember, with the 12 vote centers, we had a lot of ballots from each of these vote centers, so it took a little time to run through the counting machines. But once the numbers started coming in, we had our totals done by 9:30. And I know Dave Bixler is going to put a picture up on the overhead. And Dave was one of our key players there, and we want to do a shout out to Boy Scout Troop number 48 that assisted with the ballots that night. And our Boy Scouts are Caleb Impakoven, Joey Segrist, Sam Putnam, James Nelson, Seth Shepard, and a grown-up Boy Scout, possibly, Jason Gant. And so the boys were really helpful that night, so we just wanted to acknowledge their assistance. The next morning, thank you, Dave, the next morning, Wednesday morning, we talked to Jason Gant the night before, and we had an election recap session here at the Carnegie at 9 in the morning. And we had Jason Gant with his staff here, school district employees, Bob Litz with the county auditor's office, a representative from ES&S, and our clerk's office staff. And basically, we reviewed, the situation, what had happened, what we can do to improve. And Jason Gant very strongly suggested and stated that the city will be in charge of the next election in 2014, and we are very happy to oblige with that. We're already reviewing numbers, brainstorming on ideas for vote center locations, improvements that we can make to the ESS software. Carnegie will definitely be election central. We'll have teams on hand. If, in the case we do need to reallocate ballots, it will be a 15-minute trip, and they'll be right here. We're also going to assist the election workers in setting up the vote centers, because some of the complaints we had were parking and accessibility for those that with some type of a disability. And Colleen Moran has said she will assist us with those vote centers. And we've got some kind of interesting ideas on vote centers, but we'll wait till we have a little bit more information and share that. So I guess my final comment is I began my position 3 weeks prior to the election. Wow, what a way to start. The groundwork was laid in place already. I implemented the election plan that was put together, ensured that all the calendar items were met. Everything was published when it was supposed to be. But I look at it on a positive note that it was a great learning experience, and we will know how to deal with many of these issues prior to the next election, and the 2014 election will definitely be a much better voting experience for our citizens.
Questions for Lori? Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Not so much questions as comments. I was kind of following the drama by email as you kind of kept leadership apprised of things that were happening, and I know there were some citizens who knew what was going on, but they didn't know the depth of the issues that were happening. And I just wanted to congratulate our staff, to be kind of dumped into a pilot project like this. I mean, really, we were the guinea pig in this project. To be dumped into that as new as you are, and with everything that happened, I just really congratulate our staff for being as well prepared as they were, and for just taking it as it came. You guys were just, it was awful and it was a lot of work, but you just took it and you ran with it and you did the best you could, and I just really appreciate that because it did come off very well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councilor Karski.
Regarding the ballots in the school district employee's car, these are typically controlled document, right?
Yes, and she did sign out for those.
Okay. I'm just thinking about that and wondering the control issue and having accessibility to them and keeping them in one place. Was the school district's election this time, is that something that can be controlled by different entities, the county auditor, our office? How can that be avoided in the future?
Actually, it was a joint city-county election, and there was an agreement that was written between the city and county. And I noticed when I reviewed the agreement after the election that the school was taking on a lot more than normally they would, and normally what was in the agreement. I think it was just a situation of the changing of the guard, so to speak, and they just took charge of it, even though they had a small item on the ballot. But, we've notified them, as well as the Secretary of State, asking that the city be in charge of this in 2014. And, we did work well with the county auditor's office. They had they had a small part, but a very important part, and their part was taking in the absentee ballots, and Bob Litz was very good that day on getting that all set up for us, counting the absentee ballots, just because we were tied up otherwise here. And then, of course, we utilized their equipment, which is partly owned by us, from what I understand, to run the ballots through the machines, and it was a real smooth operation down at the county. So we do work really well with the county, and certainly have learned from this experience.
Councilor Jameson.
Yeah, I just wanted to state that I thought the outcome was pretty good. Well, it was. It was. My district did a very good job. All right, no, but seriously, I know that there was a lot of people working behind the scenes to make the election happen, and it's probably a good civics lessons for all of us to understand how these ballots are created, printed, delivered, accounted for, stamped, collected, and counted. I did hear some feedback about the time that it took in order to get those first responses, and certainly I was nervous sitting there waiting, so I may have been a little anxious about that, but will that process change?
Well, you know what, with the vote centers, it did take a little bit longer, and I thought the same thing myself, because I was used to the first results coming in about 7:15 or 7:20 generally. But when you take 57 wards and precincts and merge them into 12, and you take all those votes, and even though it was a small percentage, when they did come in and the ballot boxes were opened, the wire seals cut, the ballot boxes opened, the ballots taken out, I mean, they were large, large stacks of ballots. And they run those groups together for each vote center. They run those through the counting machines together, and they put a stack about 2 inches thick into the machine at a time, and they run those through, and then they put in another stack. And so it did take a little bit of time. I was also getting a little anxious to get those first results out. But once we got that first batch in, then it seemed like they started going a little bit faster. And if we do use the vote center plan again, which I know, I think overall with some tweaking and some changes and some adjustments as far as accessibility and parking and so on, and maybe even locations, I think that did work really well for the citizens. But we'll certainly take a look at that part of it, as far as how fast they come out.
One other note is I did go to my regular voting place and found a note on the window that stated where the closest polling place was, so I thought that was good.
Good, good.
Councilor Brown.
Lori, I wanted to just touch on the locations to follow that up. I think citizens overall were willing to embrace the change and use the voting centers, but I think we need to give a lot of thought going forward on standardizing those locations. That's the request I heard from citizens a lot. Let's find out what voting centers to use and use them every time going forward, because the last several elections, we've had different voting places every time, and I think that's the biggest frustration that taxpayers or voters see. So.
I completely agree with that. And, you know, with the absentee voting, it used to be that whichever entity was having the election, they did the absentee voting. And that was very confusing. And now everyone knows absentee voting is at the county auditors and whatever type of election it is. So certainly standardizing the vote centers is a great idea.
Any other questions for Lori? If not, we'll go on to City Council open discussion. Any items? Well, I have two. First of all, you each should have received an email today from Denise about Inside Town Hall, and we do need a volunteer for the May 4th taping of Inside Town Hall. So please see Denise if you have an interest in taping that particular meeting. Also, I want to announce that the swearing-in ceremony for the four that did win the election will be May 21st at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And we will have a need for a special meeting that day because of the change in our meeting date starting May 1st. Our three meetings will be the first 3 Tuesdays of the month, which are all before May 21st. So we can either do the special meeting to elect new leadership immediately following the swearing-in ceremonies, or we also do have a Minnehaha County meeting that day at 5:30, and we will have an agenda item. So I will look for council input as to whether you are planning on attending, those that aren't being sworn in, and if we should have the meeting immediately, the special meeting immediately following the swearing-in ceremony, or whether you would prefer to wait and have it either before the Minnehaha County joint meeting. So don't all raise your hands at once, but I can give you time to decide, but those are the options that we have. It is by ordinance that we do need to elect leadership at that third meeting in May. Councilor Jameson.
I would just add that I think it's a good idea to do that election on our own without the joint meeting. Was that for sure part of the option?
No, well, we wouldn't do it at the joint meeting. We
Okay.
would still have to call a special meeting, and that would have to be held either before or after the joint meeting.
Oh, okay.
But we could do it right after the swearing-in also.
You know, if the other counselors aren't going to be here for that swearing in, I'd hate to see them come for a special meeting. But if we're going to be in the building already for the joint, that makes more sense to me.
I agree on that also. I think the 5:30 or having our special meeting at 5 o'clock with our one agenda item and then going right into the joint right after that is better.
Anyone else have an opinion? Councilor Erpenbach.
I guess I thought the swearing in, I guess it's not mandatory, but I would expect that we would all be here out of respect for our colleagues. So perhaps it would,
The only thing is we have to come back anyway.
yeah. No, I'm
So-
okay with that. I'm
And the
just,
other thing is after the swearing in, you have a lot of other
you want to
little
eat
things
cake.
going.
That's what it is. It's cake and
I
punch.
may have some family members that might stop in, so.
Madam Chair, I would ask then that we set that special meeting for 5 o'clock that day, the, whatever day it is.
21st.
May 21st,
May
Monday, May
21st.
21st, 5 o'clock for the special meeting. Do I have consensus? It looks like I have a lot of nodding heads. So we will, again, set the swearing-in ceremony for 2 p.m. on Monday, May 21st, with the special meeting to elect council leadership at 5 o'clock prior to the joint Minnehaha County meeting. Any other city council open discussion? Counselor Jameson.
As a follow-up to the directions of Counselor Chair of the Fiscal Committee, Vernon Brown, the subcommittee, consisting of Dean Karski, myself, Dave Bixler, our budget analyst, and Rich Oaksel, our lead internal auditor, we've been meeting and working on, feverishly, I should say, trying to figure out, it all started with this $4 million that's left over. And the first goal was to try to prevent or eliminate the challenges that we're going through right now, trying to figure out whose ideas are best and where to spend that money. The second goal was to create a process on how to prevent this from happening in the future. And we found some research, and it all kind of stems back to, well, a couple things. We do not have a list. We have not received a list of shovel-ready projects for us to even consider at this time. But then going forward, we have found that back in 2004, there was an ordinance that essentially created a capital improvements program committee. And that kind of faded away in '08. And we're working on the reasons why that faded away and how it faded away. And but part of the reason I bring it up now is well, time is ticking. So I'll turn it over to Dean. He's got other things to add, but I wanted to start that discussion. So,
Counselor Karski.
Thank you. July 1st is when we have our, basically take our look at the CIP budget process. And the way I understand it now, the department heads formulate the CIP and take it to the mayor and the finance director for their for them to present it to the council. Not a lot of input from outside sources, basically, and having a budget committee, a capital improvements program committee, comprised of people from the community. It could be maybe involving very limited involvement from department heads because we feel they'd have their input before it came to this committee. But Chamber of Commerce, Development Foundation, the finance director, obviously we'd want on there, maybe Planning Commission, some citizens, people that can take a look at this and make recommendations to the City Council for our CIP process. And then when we do have leftover funds, to be able to address it through that same committee and get more involvement or more input into it from different sources.
right, and the goal is that there isn't much time till we get the budget, and if either we can wait and not do anything, or we could start it now. We kind of wanted to get a sense from the group if there's a high priority here, and we can get more work done on formulating our recommendations on who should be on that review committee. See what the process might entail, but just want to look for a little more direction, I guess, and I wanted to keep it as fresh as possible.
Counselor Brown.
I have a couple questions for Director Turback, if he's available. I think in order to help this discussion, at least until we get the policy in place, has there been a director-level discussion about this $4 million and what projects might be eligible or need that assistance?
Certainly all the directors were asked initially for their input on how the $4 million left over from last year could be used. So certainly that information has been gathered. We'll be meeting again tomorrow to discuss some other priorities internally on what the, in this particular case, on what street projects might be priorities, and we will review those and seek whatever input feel is appropriate, I guess. And certainly if you folks have input on that, by all means.
Could we get a shovel-ready list then?
Well, we can certainly provide a list. I can't guarantee what's shovel-ready and what's not, I guess, at this point, but they will certainly, that will have to factor into what the priorities turn out to be, is how quickly those projects can proceed.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, if I may, I have a couple questions for Director Cotter. I'm going to be very direct, Mark. One of my priorities would be getting South Dakota 100 done much quicker. Can you give us just a brief update on whether that is a project that we could put on our consideration?
Well, South Dakota 100, one of the key projects that we'll see this year and next year is the DOT has got it programmed from about 33rd Street down to south of 57th. And then we're leveraging our federal funds to improve 57th Street from Sycamore east to Highway 11 and to tie in 41st Street from essentially Harmon Park's entrance over to Highway 11. So all that right now, the design is done, and they're just working very diligently to capture all the right-of-way. And so right now we understand that some of the right-of-way is just getting hard to procure, so they're going to split the project. But South Dakota 100 right now is you're going to see two major projects here in the next 2 years that the DOT and the city are working on. And then we are working closely with the DOT on really having an emphasis to go north and to tie into I-90. And so I don't have any timetables right now. The one thing I would say is that I do think that the council should have it as a priority because you have had it in the past. The key is that the agreement that we've signed has the onus on the state to build it. And so I would keep that onus there because we have also invested dollars into roads that we've taken on, like Minnesota Avenue 2 years ago, just to name one. So it's definitely a priority, should be a priority. That's where our sewer ability is. That's where the growth of the city is going. And then there's some other projects that are essentially on the mile grid system of Sioux Falls, where that we can balance the growth pressures and source various groups. We've already had groups discussions this year with the home builders, along with the Chamber of Commerce, on our draft list of arterial streets to improve and recommend to this body. So the discussion went a step beyond this year with sourcing the business transportation group at the Chamber. So I do think that they're a good group to source.
Mark, what promises did we make for those retailers that came into Dolly Village in terms of completion of South Dakota 100? My understanding is that we made some specific promises on when that would be done, and I'm just wondering how far we're pushing that deadline.
To my knowledge, Counselor, I think that the commitments were specific to Arrowhead Parkway and going south, because they take access at 18th Street as their primary location, and then also off Arrowhead Parkway. To my knowledge, there wasn't any commitments going north.
Okay.
But we did. That mile to the north from Arrowhead Parkway to Madison Street's the only mile of the 17-mile corridor that the City of Sioux Falls is contractually obligated to pay for, and we advanced that project last year. So, but definitely keep it as a priority because it's really the lifeblood of Sioux Falls. As we start to grow to the east, we've got to have those regional corridors to move traffic.
Well, in terms of new streets, there's a great return on investment in developable property along that route. So $4 million would do what, about a mile of it?
No, that South Dakota 100 is fairly large. Our estimate right now is about, if there's no major structures, box culverts, and right-of-way is reasonable, it's close to about $7.5 to $8 million a mile. But that includes, it's a major facility with a large bike trail, a lot of grading, and in most cases, some utility relocation with some of the overhead power. So there's a number of those aspects that we have to. It's a bigger project than a typical arterial street in Sioux Falls that you'd normally see.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other, Councilor Erpenbach?
I wanted to go back to Councilor Jameson's comment about the CIP committee. It was set in ordinance in 2004, you said, and it faded away in 2008. Can you talk more about that? What does that mean, and what was it before? Does the ordinance say who was supposed to be on that committee, or is it just a random label?
Councilor Karski has the ordinance. Why it faded away, we're working on that, trying to figure out. We're trying to capture some old minutes from meetings in the past, like who was the chair, things like that. We're working on that. we're kind of having to dig through that ourselves and find it out, but, you know, how does an ordinance just fade away? Right, we'd like to figure that out.
So it's set in ordinance. It's set by city law, and it was not an ordinance that was repealed. Is that what you're saying? It just is not being followed.
Not that we can find, right, just not being followed is all we can find, but we're not going to pin that on anybody just yet until we figure it out.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? If not, thank you all. We'll go on to presentations, and we'll begin this afternoon with Sire Overview by Sue Quambeck-Etten, Director of Central Services.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to give some opening remarks before I turn it over to our project manager for the plan review project. The Information Technology Division of Central Services has been continuing to work with the departments to roll out various document imaging solutions. Believe it or not, there's a lot of paper in city government, a lot of file cabinets, a lot of boxes, and we just need to start tackling them one by one. The first big document imaging project that we worked on was the Agenda Plus module, which you're very familiar with for the clerk's office, for agendas, meeting minutes, and video for city council and committee meetings. And the whole idea behind document imaging system is to have a central repository for your electronic documents and to increase your productivity and decrease your reliance on paper. Just wanted to make you aware of the fact that we went through a full RFP process for a citywide scanning contract. Our vendor has been chosen. The next step with that is our department assessments, which are currently underway. Not all document types are good candidates for a document imaging project. So some examples of questions to ask yourself, is this a good candidate for document imaging project would be, do I have to pull paper documents today? And do I have to do it frequently? Would a clear text search function be useful for this document type? Does it need to be archived? And some of our projects will end up becoming searchable on the website by the public. So that's another consideration. Anything that can be more efficient for city staff is those are the types of projects we're looking for. We have 6 initial departments that we've identified as having quite a bit of paper who could benefit from a document imaging solution. So we are conducting assessments of those areas right now with our vendor, and those areas include HR, fire, health, planning, building services, engineering, and the clerk's office. And that project would be for ordinances and resolutions. Just to make you aware, in terms of the assessments, that's an important step. It's going to help us with budget planning. It's going to help us decide some timelines. But there's always going to be an IT component with every single one of these projects. And it's going to be a collaborative effort between IT and that business area. We're going to need subject matter experts for the business process in each of those areas. And the first step will be documenting the paper process. What do you do today? How do you do it? And then translating that to an electronic workflow. And by creating these automated electronic workflows, that's where we're going to really see some productivity improvements. We can do it a lot of different ways. You can do concurrent routing, you can do sequential routing, and all of those are possible within our document imaging system. It's also going to allow for greater transparency within departments even. So I'll be able to look online to see where is my document, who's reviewed it already, who's next, what are the comments that have been able to give me a complete audit trail. And again, all those things are important to a document imaging system. Defining the structure, the fields, the tables, the behind the scenes for the electronic file cabinets are all key, and then the key fields that need to be indexed. So all of these need to be done before you actually start scanning. Otherwise, you're going to have to do rework, and of course, nobody wants to do that. Our next big project is the plan review module. That's going to contain a secure web portal for the development community to submit their documents electronically to the city, and for those plans to be reviewed online by city staff. This will give us increased efficiency and certainly greater transparency. Our target implementation is next month, and with me today is Corey, our IT analyst, who is the project manager for this. He's going to give you a brief presentation to give you an overview of the plan review project. And then Damien from Earhart, Griffin and Associate, he's been kind enough to agree to come. He's been part of our test group. So as a vendor, we would like him to make a few comments to let you know how he thinks this is going to affect him and the development community. So I'm going to turn it over to Corey. Thank you.
How do we get this up onto the screen? I tried pushing the buttons on it. It didn't. There we go. There we go. Thank you, Sue. Good afternoon, council members. My name is Corey Putzier, and I work within the Central Services Information Technology Division. I'm also the project manager for one of the city's top 10 projects, which is the development of the city's online plan review system. At this point here, I would like to just read to you the project's mission statement. The primary goal of the new online plan review system is to allow private firms and city staff to electronically submit, review, and comment on plans and plan applications 24/7 with only the use of a web browser. This system will also allow firms to submit online payments for any application review related fees and assessments, automate the city's plan review business processes, and maintain electronic storage of all plan review files and plan review records. I'd like to start by reviewing a little bit about how the plan review system used to work and how it will work now within the new online portal. In the past, plans have been submitted to the city via email. Some of the problems that we've had with this is that the email systems can only handle files up to a certain size. Email systems also do not like files if they are of a certain type. And we also have an issue with mailbox storage limits, limiting people to having only so many emails in their inbox, quickly clogging up the inbox for city staff. One of the benefits of the online plan review system is the web-based system doesn't limit the file size or type and also allows access to the development community 24/7. One of the other methods with the old way of doing things was we used a Word document to track the changes that were being made within a plan review process, and that document would be emailed around. Problem with that is files can get lost, they can be changed at any given time. There's no real version control within that particular Word document or central repository where the master record is kept. What the online plan review system solves is that all review files, tasks, notes, and communications are maintained, tracked, and auditable within this new system, allowing real-time collaboration between the development community and the city review staff. One of the other methods of the old plan review system is that money was collected at the end of the review process for most plans. The problem with this is sometimes the city has reviewed plans, but if no hard copies were brought in, no payment was collected. So it was decided that payments for review fees will be requested upon receiving the application with the plans, and we have also extended the ability for credit card payments to be made online by the development community. This was not an option that was available previously. What type of plans are going to be reviewed? We are going with these are the 5 plans right now that we are currently developed. That's the concept sketch plan, the preliminary subdivision plans, the development engineering plans, construction plans, and plats. And here we're going to give you some examples of what the developers will see from their web portal, just to give you an idea of how simple this process is for developers to interact and begin working with the city. As you can see right here, all that's required would be a username and email address and a password to log into the system. There's going to be a link at the bottom that allows them to create the account that gives them the ability to log into this system. And just so you can see, everything outside of that red circle right there is customizable and will be designed to fit within the look and feel of the city's new website. That will be taking place before we go live here at the beginning of May. Once the developers have logged in, they come to this particular portal screen. From here, this will give them the ability to begin the application process for any of the 5 plans we just talked about. Also in the center area there, they will be able to review any plans that they may have that are either in progress or they've been newly submitted, or review plans that have been completed, and they want to look at the historical record of those particular plans. And here is just an example of what one of the web forms look like. This one is particularly for the preliminary subdivision plan application. As you can see, it's asking for information such as the subdivision name, phase number, revision number, maybe the developer, the engineer, and some contact information. And they must go on further to check all the boxes there to meet the criteria that's required for a plan review process to be initiated. So just a summary here. This has been a collaborative team effort between the planning department, the public works engineering team, information technology, as well as members from within the development community. The sponsors for this project have been Mark Cotter, the Director of Public Works, and Mike Cooper, the Director of Planning and Building Services. And I was the project manager for this. I'd like to say thank you for the efforts of Betsy Oden from engineering and Jeff Schmidt from planning. This project would not have been successful without their leadership and effort that they brought into this project. We began this effort in October of 2011. We are looking to go live with the system here at the beginning of May. And we recently met with the Infrastructure Review Advisory Board on April 4, 2012 to give them a summary and demonstration of this new online plan review system and to gather feedback. We've also communicated to them that we are planning to try and go live here May 1st of this year. Since February of this year, the city review team has been working actively to test this process out with members from the development community, Earhart, Griffith and Associates, and Sayer and Associates. And at this point, I would like to maybe introduce Damon Grable from Earhart, Griffith and Associates, so we can provide a little perspective from the development community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Damian Gribble. I'm with Earhart, Griffin and Associates, and I had the privilege of being one of the guinea pigs for this new process, which I'm really happy that the city did take this process on. It brings us up to speed, I believe, with however other large communities deal with their plan review process. What this does for me as being a consultant for developers is it allows me to go completely paperless for my review and submittal, so I do not have to worry about anybody being on vacation or lunches or even into the days or end of the week. I can submit these plans to plan review at any time. If I need to run a little past 5, no problem, it still gets into the system. If I come in on a weekend as well, it gets into the system. Also, another thing is the file size. Sometimes we do get large sets of construction plans. They would be submitted and I would never really know if they were received or not. This will always work. I will always be assured that this process or my plans will get into the city. I can set up my design team. Anybody on my design team will be able to check in on a project and address a comment that may come from one of the city review persons. I can even have my clients check on the project as well. So if they would like to see it from the horse's mouth where the project stands, any issues that we may have, they can log in, they can check in, and begin to address those comments. As Corey also said, the ability for the clients to pay for the review process as well. They can log in remotely. They don't have to run downtown, make a special trip. I don't have to worry about taking a check up when I'm picking up my plans. It's all paid for. It can be submitted. And it also lets my client know when we can have our plans approved, when we can move on, when we can go from preliminary subdivision plan to construction plans to platting. Gives them a peace of mind that we are making progress in the plan review system. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I am very happy that the city is moving on to this online plan review as well.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
Any questions for Sue or Corey or Damien? If not, thank you very much for your presentation today. We'll now go on to Industrial Wastewater Local Limits by Bob Capel, Environmental Manager. Bob?
Good afternoon, Council Chair and Councilor. I am Bob Capel with the Public Works Environmental Division. With me today, I have Director of Public Works, Mark Cotter, and Environmental Analyst, Jesse Nyans, who oversees our industrial pretreatment program. The Public Works Environmental Division is planning to submit some proposed revisions to the ordinance under Chapter 41 in May to the Council. These revisions will basically revise our industrial wastewater local limits. So we greatly appreciate this opportunity to give this presentation, to give you a background to our industrial pretreatment program and our local limits program. This can be a fairly complex and technical topic, but I want you to be at rest. I will not be giving you a quiz at the end of the presentation. What I have pictured here is an aerial photograph of the City of Sioux Falls Regional Wastewater Treatment Facility. As you know, the city owns and operates a regional wastewater collection and treatment system. It is called a publicly owned treatment works, and the acronym for that is POTW, and that acronym will be used quite a bit in this presentation, so I want to bring that to your attention. This facility uses physical, chemical, and biological treatment processes to treat all the wastewater from our region. Our POTW collects and treats all domestic, commercial, and industrial wastewater from our service area and treats it to a level where it can be safely discharged to the Big Sioux River. Generally, POTWs do not treat industrial wastewater. They are generally designed only for domestic wastewater. So the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency adopted federal regulations which try to regulate discharges from industries so they do not negatively impact these federally funded wastewater treatment facilities, or POTWs. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency required the City of Sioux Falls to develop and implement an industrial pretreatment program. This was an unfunded mandate on the City of Sioux Falls. Our industrial pretreatment program is responsible for limiting the character and volume of pollutants being discharged to our treatment system to protect against pass-through and interference. The U.S. EPA requires our pretreatment program to develop and implement technically based local limits to protect our plant, biosolids, and receiving water from impacts from commercial and industrial dischargers. What is a local limit? In essence, a local limit is the maximum amount of pollutants that our POTW can receive and not have any pass-through or interference of its treatment facilities or adverse health effects or harm our treatment facility. I'd like to now go over the main primary goals of the industrial pretreatment program. The first is basically protect our POTW workers. Another is to prevent wastewater discharges from industries that could harm our POTW. This is an iconic picture in the industrial pretreatment arena. This was a picture that was taken in Louisville, Kentucky in the early 1980s. This was from a soybean processing plant that discharged waste hexane to their POTW. Ultimately, it caused a major explosion, caused multiple blocks of their city to be destroyed, their infrastructure to be destroyed, buildings to be destroyed, and in essence, it was what we were trying to prevent in Sioux Falls. I want to share with you these types of incidents in our country are very rare now since the Clean Water Act was developed and the industrial pretreatment program. And just for your information, this is the 40th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. Since these incidents are uncommon nationally, it is important to realize that these do occur in other countries that don't have the environmental protections that we do here in our great country. Next slide, one of the primary goals is to prevent interference of our treatment processes. This is a specific example of our biological treatment process. If you recall, I said our wastewater treatment plant also has a biological component. It is really a living system where our wastewater treatment operators grow good bacteria that basically treat and remove pollutants from our wastewater from our region. The upper right picture is a shot of our activated sludge system at our treatment facility. If you take a look, it's kind of a brown mass with some air going through it. The brown isn't from the waste. That is our good bacteria that we grow that is eating up the pollutants in the wastewater. The lower left picture is a microscopic picture of that activated sludge from the treatment facility. And I picked this picture because it really depicts an activated sludge system that is under stress. This picture shows a lot of filamentous bacteria in it. And if there's an imbalance of our bacterial mass, that can cause us to upset our treatment plant, which would cause potential permit violations and also potential violations of the surface water water quality standards by the state of South Dakota. The next primary goal is to prevent pass-through of pollutants to the environment. Our industrial pretreatment program prevents discharges of pollutants from industries which cannot be treated by our POTW. It also prevents the discharge of pollutants in quantities that would exceed the POTW's treatment capacity. If the industrial pretreatment is not successful, then these pollutants can pass through the POTW and be discharged to the Big Sioux River, which could cause fish kills and other environmental damage. This picture, fortunately, is not from Sioux Falls. Since we have had our treatment facility and the industrial pretreatment program, we have not had no discharges from our wastewater treatment plant or POTW that has caused any fish kills or any significant impacts to the environment. And we're really proud to state that. The next primary goal is to basically to continue to beneficially use domestic wastewater residuals. Our POTW treatment system generates a sludge byproduct from the treatment of wastewater at our facility, and these byproducts have to be managed. Due to the low level pollutants and the high quality of this sludge byproduct, the city is able to reuse this product as a soil amendment to the agricultural community in our area. The upper right picture is just a picture of the biosolids facultative basins where final treatment of that biosolids product is done and it is stored until used. The lower left picture there is a picture of our water reclamation land application team injecting our biosolids into a local agricultural field. We call our product SuperGrow because it is a very valuable product to us. Some key points I want to share with you. Last year in 2011, we produced 2,718 tons of solids in our SuperGrow. We also land applied 10,903,000 gallons of this product to the agricultural community. It also generated 149,752 pounds of organic nitrogen that was valuable to these farmers, so they did not have to go out and buy commercial fertilizers for their fields. This is a regional sustainable practice that reuses this product instead of treating it as a waste. And again, this is a very fortunate thing that this city has where many cities do not. There are many cities that basically their biosolids and their sludge is contaminated to the point where they cannot reuse it. In those cities, they have to dewater the sludge and place it in their landfills. Some cities actually incinerate the sludge, which is sometimes not the best thing environmentally. So again, we're very fortunate because of the industrial pretreatment program and also because our community does not have a lot of heavy, dirty industries. Those are the primary goals. Now I'd like to talk to you about the 4 pretreatment standards that are available to us to help achieve these primary goals. The first is the general prohibitive discharge standards. This basically says that no industry can discharge a pollutant which would cause a pass-through or interference of our POTW. The second standard is a specific prohibitive discharge standards. A couple examples, we have about 15 in our ordinances. That they cannot discharge pollutants which create a fire or explosion hazard. They cannot discharge wastewater which can cause corrosive structural damage to our system. And as we've had experience in the past, we know what happens when wastewater treatment systems corrode and collapse. The third pretreatment standard is categorical standards. These are developed by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. They are treatment technology based. These sample limits are similar to industry processes across the nation. So a small metal finisher in Sioux Falls like Dakota Plating has to comply with these limits and standards just like a major company like McDonnell Douglas or something in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And last, the pretreatment standard is the local pretreatment standards, which we call local limits, which we're going to focus on this afternoon. These are technically based. They are developed individually by each regulated POTW or city. They are specifically developed to protect our POTW. Now I'm going to get into a little bit how we develop the local limits. What we first have to do is develop the allowable headworks loading for all applicable criteria. Headworks loading basically means how much of a pollutant we can accept at the front of our wastewater treatment plant and then scientifically know that we will not cause pass-through or interference of our POTW. Some of the criteria that we evaluate are the local treatment plant design capacity. An example of that, our plant is designed to accept 51,240 pounds of BOD on a daily basis. So that is a criteria that we would evaluate. We also look at biological inhibition standards. If we go back to that picture about the activated sludge, that living system, we look at that activated sludge system and determine, as an example, how much cadmium, if it was discharged to our system, would interfere with that biological process or even possibly kill the bacteria. That would be another criteria we evaluate. We also look at the surface water discharge permit limits that we have on our facility. We also look at the South Dakota DNR's acute and chronic water quality standards. And we also look at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's biosolids standards for the reuse of those biosolids for land application. So we develop all these allowable headworks loadings, and then we take a look at and we determine what is the most limiting allowable headworks loading. And that most limiting criteria is the one that we use, that is our maximum allowable headworks loading, or MAHL. The next slide just gives you an example of what takes place after we've developed that maximum allowed headworks loading. Now we need to determine how much of that is available for our industries. In a simplistic view, if you take a look at that pie graph, we go out and do a lot of analysis with our team. We determine how much of that loading is coming from domestic and commercial sources. So we know that's coming from our community, so we take that away from that maximum allowed headworks loading. Then we also take a look at how much can be discharged to the Big Sioux River. That's allowed through water quality standards. How much can be discharged to the biosolids based upon federal standards? And we remove that from the portion of the pie. Then we also take a look at and we add a safety factor and a growth factor. Because obviously we want to make sure that we do have some protections and also some ability to grow in our community. And what's left of that maximum allowed headworks loading is now called the maximum allowable industrial loading, and that is the component that we now can distribute and allocate to our industries in the City of Sioux Falls. The next slide, I'm going to just kind of walk you through a few examples here. So if we develop the maximum allowed headworks loading for, say, molybdenum, and we determine it was 100 pounds, we would go through our analysis and say, we need about 50 pounds of that for domestic and commercial use, as an example, and also taking some out for a safety factor. Then we would go through and subtract from the maximum allowed industrial loading, we would take out approximately 10 pounds that would use for future growth for industry in our community. And ultimately, we would end up with about 40 pounds that would be available to distribute to our industries. Now, how do we share this pollutants to our industries? How do we place limits on these industries? We use two different methodologies. The first, we have concentration-based limits. This is a uniform limit for all regulated industries. So it doesn't matter which industry you are, how big you are, how small you are. That is a concentration-based limit that everybody has to comply with. We are proposing to develop concentration-based limits for arsenic, cadmium, copper, lead, nickel, selenium, silver, and zinc. The second method that we are going to use to allocate this maximum allowed industrial loading is called a mass-based limit. This is a very unique and a flexible opportunity that gives us a lot of chance to basically ensure that we are giving our allocation to those industries that need it the most. There are many industries in Sioux Falls that may not, for instance, discharge high levels of biochemical oxygen demand, and so we do not need to allocate that to those industries. So what we do is we allocate that to only those industries that are discharging these pollutants. So in essence, we are able to actually give them a little larger limit than a concentration-based limit. We are proposing to develop mass-based limits for biochemical oxygen demand, total spent solids, total Keldol nitrogen, and molybdenum. Now I'd like to go into just how that is broken down as an example. As a concentration-based limit, if you remember, we had like 40 pounds of a pollutant that we can discharge, that we can give to our industries. In a concentration system, we'll determine how much flow those industries generate, and we do a pretty simple calculation and come up with a concentration-based limit. In this case, if there was 40 pounds of pollutant, 1 million gallons of industrial flow, we would have a limit of 4.8 milligrams per liter that would be given to all industries. The next example is the mass-based limit. This is, again, where we have that 40 pounds, but we have chosen to only give that to industries that we know discharge that pollutant at a level of concern. In this example, we have distributed to 3 different industries in Sioux Falls as an example, and we save 4 pounds of that pollutant for future growth. The next slide is probably the most important slide for the council to take a look at. This shows the current and the proposed local limits that we are going to be presenting to the council in May. In the left column is the pollutants, or the parameters that we will be developing limits on. The second column is the existing daily local limit. The third column is the proposed local limits, and the fourth column is the units of measure of that pollutant. I want to draw your attention to the third column. As you can see, there are some of the pollutants that are in red text, some are in black, and some are in green. The red text gives you an indication that those pollutants, the city is proposing a lower limit and a more restrictive limit to the industries. The black limits are basically showing that that limit will actually be higher and less restrictive for our industries. The green text limits are new limits that we are placing in our local ordinances as we come forward to this council. One thing I just want to share with you is just an interest. You look at these milligrams per liter, what does that mean? If you take a look at cadmium, just to show you how small of a limit these are, that limit is 0.024 milligrams per liter. To give you an example would be as if you had 1 billion ping pong balls and you dumped them in a football field. They probably wouldn't fit in a football field, but you had 1 billion ping pong balls. Only 24 of those would be cadmium. Just to give you an example on what does that mean for a unit of measure. Bottom line, the significant changes are putting the conventional pollutants in our local limits. Most of the other changes, in our view, are fairly insignificant, and the main reason why is because we have done a 5-year historical review of our current industries, and we have determined that none of our current industries, based upon their current operations, their current treatment facilities, should not have any problems with meeting those new limits. Who is required to comply with these limits? All permitted significant industrial users must comply with these limits. Currently, we have 16 permitted significant industrial users. We are currently in the process of evaluating 3 permit applications for 3 other significant industrial users. All liquid waste generators that do not comply with our liquid waste control program must comply with these limits. And all liquid waste haulers that haul waste from the region to our wastewater plant must comply with these limits unless they are in compliance with our liquid waste control program rule. In an example, right now we have about 250 licensed industries that are not considered significant industrial users that our program manages. To give you a synopsis where we've been, where we're at, this has been over a 3-year process. We did about 2 years of monitoring to get the data necessary to develop these local limits. It took us over a year to basically do the data collection and to develop the technically based local limits. On April 2nd, we submitted our formal package to the South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources. As today, we are presenting this to the council. We anticipate that the South Dakota DNR will public notice our local limits early May. We are planning to meet with those interested impacted industries in early May to go over these limits. We have already discussed it with them informally. We plan to bring our ordinance revisions, proposed revisions to the council about May 14th on the first reading. We expect that the closure of public comments will be made on these will be sometime late May. If there are no significant comments from the South Dakota DNR or the US EPA or the public, we would anticipate that these local limits will be accepted in a very fast manner. So based upon that, we will be coming back to City Council, hopefully on June 11th, for a second reading for these proposed changes to our local limits. Before I end and open up for questions, I guess I would personally like to thank my staff, the public works staff that have worked on this project. It is a very lengthy, a very complex, and very technical project. And the thing I would like to share with you, this is done all internally with our existing staff. Many cities do not do this. They hire a consultant to do this work. We would estimate that it would cost us about $200,000 to $250,000 at least to have a consultant come in and do this work that our current existing staff have just completed for the city. So I'd like to thank them and acknowledge them for their hard work. And I'll take any questions at this time.
Councillor Entenmann.
I do have a couple of questions, Bob. This is mandated by the feds. Did the feds put a timeline on us as far as when we had to have this completed by?
No, we've had a pretreatment program that's been mandated on us for probably 20 years. This is just a revision of the local limits. We have basically chosen that this is we needed to revise these limits because there's been some changes in the state standards, water quality standards, and we just it's a unilateral decision on the city's behalf to change these ordinances. And it's important to change them because if they get a little too old, it's a greater chance they could be challenged someday by an industry if they weren't really technically based.
I've got just a couple more questions, if you don't mind. You've indicated that there is no significant impact to our existing industries that we have in the city right now.
Correct. We have evaluated what they've discharged to us in the last 5 years, and none of these industries that we currently have permitted would have violated any of these proposed limits.
Okay, and you're going to have some discussions with the ones that would fall underneath this. When you come forward with an ordinance proposed for us, are you going to be able to address, I'm just kind of curious, if any of these new limits that we have here, there are some significant changes on some of these limits, and I'm just curious as far as the cost of compliance on the part of existing companies in our community.
Yeah, very good question. Probably the most restrictive change on the concentration-based limits is cadmium. That's a pretty significant drop. But it's important that cadmium to be recognized that it's very rare for industries to use cadmium anymore in their processes. So again, we don't anticipate that any of these industries would have to change in their treatment processes as they move forward to meet these limits.
I just appreciate when you do come forward, if you could just address this a little bit.
Sure.
I'd like to be informed as to if there are any issues that exist out there.
Sure.
And what the cost of that compliance might be.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Erpenbach.
Just one quick question, Bob. This seems very technical and really, really you've drilled down pretty deeply. Is this something that's required to be an ordinance? Does the federal government require us to do this, or is it something that we could do in administrative rules and maybe let it wiggle a little more?
The normal expectation is that it has to be an ordinance. In matter of fact, we have to go to our city attorney's office and to ensure that we have the legal authority to develop local limits and enforce them. And we have gone through our attorney's office and received that written confirmation that is part of our package to the DNR and EPA.
Great, thank you.
We have one more presentation this afternoon, so one question left.
Excuse me. Robert, I'm going to ask you to explain the industrial pretreatment program as far as these materials that we're putting on farmlands. Mm-hmm. Where are they coming from? Where do we store those? One of the questions I have gotten is the material that we move out off of North Cliff across from the street department and what we're doing with that material.
Right. That material is lime sludge from our water purification facility that's on Cliff Avenue. These biosolids basins are out at the wastewater treatment facility, which is in the northeast part of Sioux Falls and Sycamore. And that's the product I'm talking about today, is the biosolids from the wastewater treatment plant.
But don't we do pretty much the same thing with both those materials?
Yes.
Is that we provide them for
lime
farmers?
sludge is also brought to agricultural community as a product. And usually that's a much less of concern. There are no real regulatory, federal or state regulations on that lime sludge, just because, again, that's a byproduct from treating fairly clean water to get it ready for drinking. So there's not the pollutants, potential pollutants in that byproduct like a wastewater sludge. There's great potential of having pollutants in that.
I just think this is something that we could really promote to the public, showing how we are working with the farm community and that to provide these materials to them.
Yeah, it's a great partnership.
Thank you.
Bob, one last thing. I think the dates you have for first reading and second reading are Monday dates, and by May, we will be having Tuesday meetings.
I recognize that after I submitted the presentation. This was submitted, I think, prior to that formal change, so thank you. We will,
Just a
we will
reminder.
revise those.
Thank you
I
very
won't be here
much.
on Monday.
All right, thanks
you.
very much. We'll now go on to our presentation on Washington Pavilion 2011 financials by Larry Toll, President of the Washington Pavilion.
Madam Chair, members of the Council, I'm Larry Toll, President of the Washington Pavilion. I believe each of you have received a copy of the financial sheets that we submitted that compare the year-over-year 2011 versus 2010. Couple things. These are unaudited. Our auditors just were in with us in the last few weeks, and so the audit won't come until about May or early June. We will provide that audit to the city clerk at the time we get that. The first line, obviously, is city funding, and let me remind you, all of the funding that comes to the Washington Pavilion from the city comes from the entertainment tax. There's really three sources. This operational support that you provide, anything that is in the CIP, that for the Washington Pavilion also comes out of entertainment tax, as does anything that's in OSEP. I also printed the material with our Board of Trustees from our letterhead so that you can see who sits on the Board of Trustees for the Washington Pavilion. A few highlights of the year. I think if you look at total revenues, one of the things we have recognized a couple years ago was the need to continually increase the amount of revenues that go through the pavilion because there are so many fixed costs. Of the $1,368,000 that the city provides, all but about 100,000 of that goes into the actual operation of the building. $460,000. I think if you look at utilities, was $422,000 last year. But security, our maintenance staff, both housekeeping and the technical engineering staff, spend most of that money in maintaining the building. We have last year provided $365,000 in taxes between the 4% state tax, 2% city's tax, tourism tax, and the entertainment tax. It added up to $365,000. 122 of that comes directly back to the city. Some highlights: contributions of individuals was up 31% year over year. Admissions and ticket sales were up 16%. Facility rentals and sales of service were up 24%. Those were the key things we were really working on to get that overall revenue increase of 8.4%. And if you look at expenses, they went up 5.4%, and I'd call your attention to the line program expenses, 3 up from the total. Anytime we have a successful show, the typical show has a back end to it that the touring company will get a portion of any revenues over. When we see money, they also see money, and that's why the program expenses tracks with that. If you cut to the bottom line, the $53,000 net revenue over expenses, that's one of 5 years out of 13 that the pavilions operated that we've had an operating profit, and obviously that is the key to the long-term success of the Washington Pavilion. And then we had additional revenues for the Mary W. Somerville Hall naming of $115,000, so I'm happy to report a net surplus of $168,000 for the year. I'd also like to give you a few highlights for the year. Memberships were at a 10-year high last year. Our traffic was up 5% to 375,000 people.
We track day events. We have a lot of events going on every day at the Pavilion. We did 1,399 day events at the Pavilion. That's up 4%. The seats sold for our 6-show performance series was at an all-time high at about 1,345. The Visual Arts Center was at an 8-year high for the traffic through there. We had 80,000 people through the Science Center, and we touched 22,000 people in our education outreach. Again, we had over 20,000 hours of volunteer service from ushers and docents and people in our Science Center. I'd like to showcase one tonight. If you've seen we used to have an old member newsletter that came out. It was kind of like a newspaper, and it was tired, it was old, and if you were like me, you might have recycled it on the way in from the mailbox. In August, we launched Now Pavilion. We are in our 5th issue. The current one just came out, which it's not quite as colorful, but we couldn't get Ansel Adams to colorize his photographs. Our executive editor is with us, David Zanakis. Raise your hand, David. David is a volunteer. He probably gives us 30 hours a week in setting the direction for this magazine, editing it. He's using all of his experience that he had in running a magazine to bring it forward to help us make sure that we have a great magazine, and he has done just a really good job. And I'll tell you, besides our own material that we include in there, we have the Sioux Falls Jazz and Blues, the Sioux Falls Arts Council, the South Dakota Symphony, and downtown Sioux Falls has something in there every month. David did a special on South Dakota Broadcasting on their 50th birthday celebration. We did a layout on the Big Sioux River Greenway project, story on Big Brothers Big Sisters, the South Dakota Chorale, the Sioux Falls chapter of Flag, the State Theater, of course, links to literacy, and Augustana College, and it goes on, and we will have a 4-page spread on the Parks and Recs Department in the next, our 6th issue, when it comes out on the 1st of June. The other thing I think that you're always interested in, and I love to talk about, is what's the economic impact of the Pavilion? We have some fairly simple processes we go through to come up with, to be able to say that we have a $15 million impact in this community. And there'll be more information in June when a study that's being done by all the arts organizations comes out. But let me talk and get a little more specific on some of the things. You were most agreeable and worked with us to be able to bring Nature Unleashed in. Nature Unleashed has been a huge turnout for a lot of people. We're at 23,000 people through it as of today. We have offered free First Fridays like we always do, but we also offered free February Fridays, and in those dates we've already seen over 4,200 people come through free. We've had almost 6,000 students to date. We've got another 5,000 of them coming. I went out and raised $11,400 to be able to do outreach to schools to say we'll either give you discounted admissions or up to $100 for a bus. The last time I asked how much of my $11,400 was spent, they told me $20,500. So that's how nonprofits work. We've had 162 classes. We'll have a day where we have more than 600 students in there. 52 of the classes come from Sioux Falls, but let me give you a little outreach. Iowa, 23 classes from 14 cities. Minnesota, 20 classes from 12 cities. Nebraska, 7 classes from 7 different cities. South Dakota, 109 classes from 41 different cities. We thought Aberdeen was going to be the group that came from the farthest until Belle Fourche scheduled. They'll be here Friday with the group. All of that, and as we've talked to schools and said, tell us about it, they not only rave about the Field Museum exhibit, 80% of them said if it weren't for your funding, we would not have been able to do it. So while our attendance is up, had we not done this, we probably would have seen much less attendance. And so it has become really a great opportunity. Besides those students, however, we have had 35 different states represented, and the normal suspects: Iowa 1,208, Minnesota 635, Nebraska 219, but Tennessee 6, Alaska 6, Colorado 36, and so 35 different states have been through it and were able to partake in it, and that is what I call economic development. Ansel Adams has only been opened since March 3rd. We've had almost 3,000 people through that, and 24 different states have already been represented going through that. I think you can look beyond just the numbers, though, when our health systems or anybody that's going outside of this community and they start looking to recruit people, when they come, sometimes we are the first place after the business that some of these candidates see, maybe the first place their spouse sees. We make Sioux Falls look bigger. We provide some quality of life issues that people might not expect when they come to Sioux Falls, and I think how you measure that, I'm not sure, but it's been a great, great addition, I think, to this community. Lastly, I would tell you, I apologize, you gave us an extension on our contract with for managing the facility. It took me several weeks to get my attorney to come up with some suggested changes, and it's taken even more time for me to get to them. So the onus of getting that done lies with me, and as soon as our last show of the season basically is Midtown Men on Thursday, I will start looking at that. So I would be happy to address any questions you might have, but thank you for working with us, and I think we have a great, great facility for this community.
Thank you, Larry. Questions for Mr. Toll?
The only thing standing between you and dinner is me.
No, we have a 5:30 meeting.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other business to come before us, this meeting is adjourned.